Yeah, straight to mute. Right. Let me get this up here. Uh, live video. Alright, come up. Sound levels are good.
Super.
Okay. Right, that should be with you now, Lingy.
Mercury's typing. Ta-da. Ooh. No, I don't do it on that. I'll do it on Chrome, don't I? That's what we said. Copy link. Into Chrome.
Alright. Give us 2 seconds. See if I can go into the edit and quickly change the thumbnail, because it normally just puts up your face and it always comes up with a weird pause for some reason when you're live. Right. Here we go. Oh, thumbnail. So, here we go. Save. Right. Should be ready to go. But anyway, how you doing, mate? Like it's it's been a year since we last chatted. So what's been happening in your world?
I think we spoke in August, didn't we? August
It
last
was
year.
August,
So
yeah.
it was a very busy summer for us. It was really good, very enjoyable. And then at the end of a busy summer, we went off to the Middle East. We put 4 of our 5 to boxes and shipped them over to Dubai. And we were working in fact, it was just inside Abu Dhabi. We were staying in Dubai, but we were working in Abu Dhabi, a place called Kizad, which was fantastic, a nice little brand new airstrip. The idea was that we were going to be taking what the blades do in the UK, passenger flying and dispatch. We met some regulatory hurdles, which was rather frustrating, but we eventually got the approval and we flew some passengers out there. And actually, the big bit was we got to take part in the Dubai Air Show, which was fantastic. It was the first time the Blades and 2XL had been involved with the Dubai Air Show, so it was very good.
Yeah, so what was it like over there in Dubai? Because I'm guessing it's probably a lot different, to the UK airshow scene. How did it work over there?
Well, it's Dubai is very much a corporate air show, so a commercial show. It's a bit like Farnborough, so it's not so
Yeah,
much a public
Singapore and
display.
yeah.
It's more about the sales of airliners more than anything else. But they get a few acts in to keep the air show goers occupied, and that's why we were there. It's great.
Brilliant. Because we're here with Lingy. I'm guessing a lot of you folks know who Lingy is. He was a former Tornado F3 pilot, best plane in the world in my opinion. And also, I think, I'm correct in saying this, the longest member on the team of the Red Arrows. I think it was 10 years. I think they just couldn't get rid of you. Could you? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I needed more practice, is what I say. But yes, it was 10 seasons in total. Of course, there was one season I didn't actually get to fly for the whole season because of my I had an accident and unfortunately couldn't fly the whole season. But in all, I think my name is on 10 years worth of Red Arrows pictures and calendars and things. So I call it 10 years.
Yeah, I think when you come into RAF Scampton, your picture should just be like on a big plaque there. You're just like,
No, I think some people would have burnt it by now.
But while we get the questions in, guys, so get your questions in. But Lingy, I want to talk about just briefly about your time on the Tornado F3 because it is my favourite plane. What was your experience on the aircraft? I know you talked it in the interview, but how did you find the aircraft and what was it like to fly?
It was a great aeroplane. It was mocked a bit from the rest of the Air Force point of view in that it wasn't a dogfighter, and everyone says it's a tornado fighter, but couldn't really fight. But that's actually not the case. By the time I left the aeroplane in 2007, it was very capable. Most importantly, it had a very capable weapons platform. So when I joined it, great day out with a Typhoon. We were holding off at Lucas, waiting to do an air show roll demonstration. When those that might know him was Jez Attridge turned up in a Typhoon.
Yes.
So while we were waiting to get into the airfield, he said, well, why don't we have a race? And so 2 tornadoes and a Typhoon sort of pointing east off the coast of St Andrews. slowed down at very low level, and put in the max reheat, and off we went. And acceleration wise, they were pretty neck and neck. And then as soon as we went through the sound barrier, he just went. That's the point. The Tornado had this ramp system that moved when you went through Mach 1.3, I think it was, to keep the air subsonic into the intakes, and that created a lot of drag, so then it slowed the acceleration down, whereas the Typhoon just almost disappeared. But that was very exciting. But it was a very, very quick jet at low level, and it was great to have, at max takeoff, I think it was 25-ton aeroplane, so you could really load the thing up with fuel and weapons, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And yeah, you see there's a couple of questions coming in now, Mike. But yeah, just tell us what you're currently up to. You're with 2XL, aren't you?
Yes. So I left the Air Force in April last year, April 19. I'd already arranged a job with the Blades, so full-time job is with the Blades. And of course, the Blades are having a bit of a tough year, as everyone is. We've managed to get some of our day-to-day business of passenger flying in. I think we flew 167 passengers, which, considering we couldn't actually operate until the start of August, and then we finished operating end of September, really. So in 2 months, we flew 167 passengers, which was pretty good. So it was fairly busy. But of course, air shows didn't really occur. We did one public air show in Guernsey, and that was it for the whole year. Yeah. We did a few shows at Sywell, at our home base, but we didn't really get to do any major shows because, of course, there weren't any. Now, normally in the winter, I was just talking about going to the UAE. There was a plan for us to go back to Dubai this year, but of course COVID has had something to say about that. So it's going to be a quiet winter, and with the not so much revenue coming in for the Blades this year, what we've done just to keep the pilots sort of busy, if you like, a few of us have actually gone to fly for other parts of 2XL. So we're flying twin-engined aeroplanes, the PA-31, the Navajo, and the Panther, on some of the jobs that 2XL do out with of the Blades. Of course, the parent company is 2XL Aviation. One of the roles is search and rescue, so fixed-wing search and rescue, supporting the Coast Guard helicopters, counter-pollution, oil spill response. You've probably seen the aeroplanes that fly around, the 727s with the spray dispersal system. So that is oil spill response. That's a contract that 2XL have to maintain and provide those aircraft. There's also a smaller aircraft that goes with that. So that's one of the PA-31s. So that's one of the roles that I've taken on. So it's interesting. It's good flying. It's at Doncaster, so it's a bit away from home, but that's where the main flying base is for 2XL. So it'll be interesting over the winter. And as I say, it's another feather in the cap, and their roles are very varied, so it does stay very interesting.
Absolutely brilliant. So as you can see, Lingy, on the side, there's some comments coming in. So I'm going to let you loose and enjoy, guys. We've got Lingy for about an hour, so hopefully you're going to enjoy this Q&A. But Lingy, take it away.
Superb. Thanks, Mike. And good evening, everyone. Some names there that I haven't seen for a while. Hello, Kim. Hello, Pete, Adrian, and Jude, Carl Lawrence. There you go. There's some really some familiar names coming up. So thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure to come and talk to you. So I'm just going to run it as an exact Q&A. So I'm going to look through your questions. So if you've got some questions there, get them in for me, and I'll answer as many as I can. There'll be some that I don't think are going to be relevant, but I'll make that known if that's the case. So why don't we start at the top? Peter Anker. Hello, Peter. You're a very avid follower on Twitter, I think, and I see a lot of tweets from you. So thanks for coming in. If you had to choose flying the Grey Spitfire, the Blades, and the Reds, what would your favourite fly be? Well, I haven't done a lot of stuff in the Spitfire so far. I think I've got about 5 hours, and I've only been solo in it once. So I was desperate to get my hands back on that aeroplane. It's actually gone in for its winter maintenance now, so I can't get my hands on it, unfortunately. But I definitely would like to get a lot more time in the Grey Spitfire. The Reds jets were fantastic. Just that flying the Hawk was brilliant. It was such a privilege to take that aeroplane all around the world and go to so many countries and demonstrate the best of British. It was a very old, now it's a pretty old aeroplane. It's older than me. I think it's 46 years old or something. So it's actually a real demonstration of how good British technology was. It's 1970s technology that is still very simple, very reliable, very easy to maintain, and really there's nothing more than you need for what the Red Arrows do with it today. Now, of course, if the Red Arrows were to branch out and do other things, then they might need more technologically advanced aeroplanes. But at the moment, that aeroplane is pretty perfect, and it was great. I did a couple of thousand hours, I think, in Hawks, so they were a lot of fun. And of course, flying in a 9-ship jet team is brilliant flying in itself. And the Blades, the Extra 300 is a fantastic aeroplane. It's very different. It's when you fly in formation, it's actually broadly similar. So I can picture now, as Red 3 in 2018, exactly what my hands and feet were doing in a formation loop. And my hands and feet do almost exactly the same when I fly the Blades aeroplane. The one difference is that the speed differential at the top of the loop means I have to use quite a lot of rudder. And of course, the effect of the propeller on the tail fin on the rudder means I have to use my feet as we slow down during the loop. So I just put a bit more rudder in, which I didn't have to do in the Hawk. But my hands probably do. The movements in my hands are pretty similar between the Hawk and the Extra in flying a formation loop. So you wouldn't expect that really with the differences, the vast difference in the aeroplanes. You know, the Hawk weighed 5.7 tons. The Extra probably weighs 700 kilograms, so 5 tons less with 300 horsepower against 5,200 pounds of thrust. So, you know, there's huge difference between the aeroplanes. But as I say, actually flying in formation loops, it is broadly similar from a wingman point of view. And of course, you can do a lot more with the Extra in that you can take it to 10G. You can do a lot of the gyroscopic aerobatic maneuvers. So a long-winded answer, but I genuinely I'd love flying all three of them. I definitely want to fly the Spitfire a bit more. The best thing about the Blades is that we get to share the experience by putting passengers in the front of the aeroplane. We can show them what being in close formation doing aerobatics is like, which you couldn't really do day to day in the Red Arrows. There were a few people we got to do it every now and then, but it is the day-to-day job of the Blades is to fly passengers and show them what the experience is like. And when I start flying the Grey Spitfire again in the new year, that's exactly what I'll be doing. I'll be sharing that experience and giving passengers in the back of the aeroplane the joy of experiencing Spitfire. And I can tell you, it is an incredible, incredible experience. So from that aspect, Blades and now the air leasing, the Grey Spitfire, are definitely the way forward in terms of what I want to be flying all the time. And yeah, hopefully every week I'll get to do both. But let's see what COVID brings and what the summer will lead on to. All right, I'm going to move down to some other questions. Hello, Carl. Hope you're keeping well. Yes, I am indeed. Thank you. Hello, Jude. Hello, Adrian. Chris Nichols. Did I ever fancy flying the Typhoon? There's a good question. I actually got to go in a Typhoon. A guy that I went through training with, Jimmy Bolton, was the officer commanding of 29 Squadron, the operational conversion unit, in about 2015 or 16. And he gave me a call and said, "Do I fancy a trip?" So I went and did some 2v1 air combat with my mate, and in the back of a Typhoon. Now you might remember the camouflage paint. So it must have been 2015 because it was a camouflage painted aeroplane. That was actually our wingman. So we were the 2v1, and he was the wingman. And so it was great to do some air combat in the Typhoon, and it is such an impressive aeroplane. Doing this combat, it is a high performance. The kit in it is incredible. And at the end of this combat, we had a bit of fuel left. So James said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, can you show me, with 2,000 hours on this aeroplane, can you show me what still impresses you with all that time and that experience?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So we were already at, I think, 20,000 feet. He put in the afterburner and climbed to 50,000 feet, and we hadn't travelled very much downrange. So we'd just pretty much gone almost vertical and got to 50,000 feet in not a lot of time. And at the top of that, 50,000 feet, he then put in what in a normal aeroplane would be full pro spin controls. So, the air is very thin. He overly controlled the aeroplane to try. You tried that in a Hawk or a Tornado, it would depart. It would fall out of the sky and go into a nasty spin. Did it with a Typhoon, and it was still as manoeuvrable up there as it had been down at 20,000 or even lower. So incredibly impressive aeroplane. The answer to the question, did I ever fancy flying it? Actually, for real, yes, the answer is I definitely did. So I went over to Canada in 2004 to do my tactical weapons training on the NATO flying training course. And at the time, we were about to get role disposed at the end of that course. So the options were to go and fly the Jaguar, the Harrier, the Tornado F3, or the Tornado GR4. And I'd actually said it was getting close to the first course on the Typhoon. So I asked if I could delay my streaming, my role disposal, and go and be one of the first students on the Typhoon. Unfortunately, they said, "No, you don't." I actually offered to go back to Lindsay News and be an instructor for a bit longer, just so I could tread water, if you like, and wait for that first Typhoon course. But unfortunately, they said, "No, you're going to the Tornado F3." The idea then is that they wanted people to get instructors to get experience on the Tornado, to then become instructors on the Tornado, to then go to the Typhoon as air defence instructors. That was the plan I was told anyway. So that's why I went to the Tornado F3. As it happens then, I became an instructor on the Tornado, but I went straight to Red Arrow, so I never got to actually go and qualify on the Typhoon myself. So the answer is yes, I did want to fly the Typhoon, but the Royal Air Force at the time didn't let me. I had to go and fly the Tornado. Right, Swain01. Hi, Mike. Where was the most difficult place to fly a display at in the UK? There are varying degrees of difficulty. Now, of course, the topography, so the layout of the display site is challenging in some places, the likes of Foy, Dartmouth, where you've got river valleys, high ground or terrain to think about during the display, what the weather might do there, if you've got low cloud base, is it forcing into a valley, have you got escape options, etc. So they've definitely got to think about. Other places like Biggin Hill, you were capped with airspace above you because of the London airspace. So you had to be very cognizant throughout that time. Certainly Red One did, and the synchro leader did, of exactly where the airspace was above you. And places like Dunsfold, where Gatwick was just to the east, and you had to think about how high you could be at certain areas of the display site. So they're all very challenging in their own regard. Likewise, the UK, of course, the weather's very changeable. So you might do the Sunderland Air Show one day, and it's a beautiful blue sky. Actually, it then becomes a relatively straightforward display. But then the next day, it's a 700-foot cloud base with a massive amount of wind, and you've got to fly the display completely differently. So the weather in the UK is more the challenge, and there were certainly some sites where you had to have your wits about you more than others, either based on airspace above or the surrounding topography. But I'd say from a topography point of view, somewhere like Windermere in the Lake District, Foy in Cornwall, or Dartmouth down in Devon, they were the challenging ones that I remember. What do you think about an F-16 being shot down by a MiG-21? I don't think that's very relevant to this conversation, so I'm going to pass over that one. Hello, Kim. Hello, Adrian. Hello, Jude. Hi, Lingy. Do you prefer flying seaside air shows or overland, and why? That is a good question. They each have their own merits, really. The thing I like in the Blades about flying an overland show is that we can come down to what's known as the 150-meter line. The display regulations are, for a jet display, you have to be 230 meters away from the crowd when you perform your maneuvers. For our little piston aeroplanes, we can actually take it into 150 meters. So places like Bournemouth, Eastbourne, Sunderland, when you get to 150 meters from the beach, you're looking at the front, you can actually see all those tens of thousands of people lined up on the beach. And that's the beauty of a seaside show, is that the crowd is always considerably bigger than an overland show. Even places like Riyadh, where I think 50,000 people in the crowd, you're talking Bournemouth, where there could be 10 times that number at that display. And you can see them all when you come into this 150-meter line. So I think seaside shows are definitely, from a visual perspective, seeing where the crowd are, they are definitely my preferred from that aspect. From a actually flying the display point of view, they become a bit harder because a lot of the display is based on geographical points on the ground, where for our synchro maneuvers, we'll go to those exact points on the ground, then face up towards each other. And it's those points you have on land shows. For example, if you were to do Riyadh, actually the end of the runways are beautiful, and that line is the runway. So that makes it a lot more simple in terms of actual line-up maneuvers, line features, and these geographical points. When you're over the sea, you don't have those geographical points, so you've got to just use the training you've done throughout the winter training period to actually work out where those points might be over the sea. And you use, in the Red Arrow, something called wave technique. So you pick a wave at the point where your normal geographical point would be in the canopy as you commit to the maneuver. And you're using this thing called wave technique, so it becomes a bit more of a challenge. But I do enjoy a challenge as well, so that does make it fun. But I think seaside shows, just because the crowds are normally a lot bigger and you really can see them, even though sometimes at airfield sites, if the display line is orientated on the runway, it makes it more simple from that perspective. So I hope that's answered that, Jude. Hello, James. Another question from Peter. Hi, Lingy. Besides Biggin Hill, which has been your favourite display site? Yeah, Biggin Hill was great. Riyadh is always good. We know there's a very critical crowd at Riyadh, because it's a well-informed audience. So Riyadh is good, and you've got display teams and pilots and other aircrew from all around the world. So it's great to interact with other people. From a display, actual physical display point of view, in the blades, I enjoyed Guernsey this year. Guernsey was good. I hadn't done Guernsey with the blades before, but that's a nice site to fly. I do enjoy Bournemouth, just because I've said the huge size of the crowd. I enjoy Sunderland. I enjoyed Southport. They're all great. They are all great. But from a pride point of view, definitely displaying at Biggin Hill was my best, most proud moment, both in the blades and in the Red Arrows. Templar 7832. Hi, Lingy. I've lost you now. Hang on. Need to go back up to that. I think you're the most amazing pilot. I'm sure a lot of people don't agree with that. I've just been in the right place at the right time and needed more practice in the Red Arrows, as I was bantering with Mike. But your question is, are you planning to apply to fly in the BBMF? The BBMF, the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, is a Royal Air Force unit. So they are full-time Royal Air Force personnel who fly and operate those aircraft. So unfortunately, now I've left the Royal Air Force, I am not eligible to apply to join the BBMF. Now, I did apply when I was still serving. I did apply on a couple of occasions for the officer commanding role. Now, what they do is they pre-select the officer commanding actually 4 years in advance of his takeover or his tenure as the OC. So it actually becomes a 7-year job. But by doing that, you get to understudy the current leader for a year, the next leader for 3 years, and then you have your 3-year tenure. And by doing that, you can just soak up all of this experience, and it just keeps the experience levels very fluid on the team. So I applied for that back in 2011 and 2014, I think it was. Unfortunately, I wasn't successful, so I didn't get the opportunity to join the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight. At the time, of course, I was in the Red Arrows and enjoying it, so I couldn't be too disappointed. It is something that I definitely would like to have done, though, just not only to fly those priceless aeroplanes, but just to be part of what the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight represents, and for all of those people that have perished or suffered during their time in the service, and that was very important. And those aeroplanes are priceless, as I say. So the goal of the BBMF is definitely something I would like to have been part of, but sadly, it wasn't to be. Do you think BAE should have developed, this is BAT 21, do you think BAE should have developed an active radar version of the Skyflash air-to-air missile? Well, actually, the Tornado F3, when I was using the Skyflash, we then moved on to an active version, which was, or an active missile, which was the AMRAAM, and it integrated very well with the aeroplane. And as I mentioned, if you were on earlier, the tactics evolved very, very rapidly into what then became quite a potent force with the Tornado F3 and data link and the AMRAAM. So the aeroplane wasn't ever going to stay in service for that longer amount of time after that because of the introduction of the Typhoon and the weapon systems that has. So there wasn't really a need to develop a missile specifically to replace the Skyflash for the Tornado. The AMRAAM did a great job as a replacement. John Ellis, how much practice do you think you'd need if you decided to fly a formation demo and air show again? The question with the blades, we did our last display with the blades this year in October. I think it was October the 15th. And our next one won't be probably until at the earliest middle of March, maybe end of March. So it's going to be about 5 months. And then from getting back in the aeroplanes, we have to do a little bit of currency flying as singletons. And then we'll probably do about 8 to 10 flights to get back to display standard before we can go and do public display flying. So I think from a safe point of view, you could probably do it in a handful of flights. But you want to be safe, but then you want to have polish on the performance as well. You know, we're very critical of our own performance, so we want to be as good as we can. So thankfully, 2XL afford us the training time. So I think we'll probably do somewhere between 8 and 10 practices before we're then up to our display standard. Adrian asks, what was my favourite place for exercises with the Tornado F3? That was, that was a good question. So I only did a couple of years with the Tornado, but I did get to go to some amazing places. So I was very fortunate when I first joined Treble 1 Squadron. We were off to an exercise in Abu Dhabi called the Advanced Tactical Leadership Course, I think it was, ATLC. So the squadron was involved with that, and I was going out as a support pilot. Unfortunately, on the way to Abu Dhabi, we were going to stop in Cyprus overnight, and we were tanking all the way to Cyprus. Unfortunately, my jet had an engine failure just to the west of Sicily. I had to shut my engine down and divert into Sicily, into an F-16 base. So I never actually made it. After all that, I got stuck in Sicily for 2 weeks while they fixed various problems on the jet, and I never actually made it there. So I was very much looking forward to the exercise, but didn't get to do it. But I then went to India as a guest pilot with 43 Squadron. So they took me and my navigator, Ed, as a crew from 111 Squadron with 43 Squadron, we went to Gwalior, base in India, an Indian Air Force base, where we got very involved with a month-long exercise. And it was great. That was a fantastic experience, working with the Indian Air Force and some of the assets they have. In fact, the first trip I did, the Famil flight I did, was getting airborne from Gwalior in my Tornado on the wing of a MiG-27, so a Russian low-level bomber. Looks a bit like a Jaguar, I suppose. So you could almost call it almost the Russian equivalent of a Jaguar. On the wing of this MiG-27. Now, Gwalior is just south of Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. So we were at 3,000 feet, and we flew over the top of the Taj Mahal in formation with a MiG-27, which was just mind-blowing. Because I'm looking at the Taj Mahal from the air in formation with the Russian-built Indian Air Force aeroplane. It was a very odd experience, but incredible experience nonetheless. The MiG then peeled off, and I met up with a Mirage 2000 back down towards Gwalior. And we were doing some 1v1 combat. And that was a lesson for me, because he was an amazing, amazing combat pilot in an aeroplane that in air combat maneuvering or basic fighter maneuvers was much more capable than a Tornado F3. So he taught me a lesson in air combat. The Indians are only allowed to do 2 engagements per sortie. So per flight, they can only do 2 engagements. The first one, I started off behind him. Within 20 seconds, he was behind me. And the last one, he started off behind me, and I did my best to try and stave him off as long as possible, but it wasn't to be. And he taught me a lesson on both of those engagements. So India was very good. I then went on just before I left the jet. In fact, it was the day after I got told I was joining the Red Arrows. I went on a month-long exercise in Denmark, which was part of the tactical leadership program. I was, in fact, the detachment commander for the F3s, and it was incredible. We've got all these sort of middle experience pilots from all around Europe who get together to do this tactical leadership program. And you go off on medium scale missions, large scale missions as part of coalition forces. And that was fantastic. Just going across and doing that course and getting that qualification as my time on the Tornado was dwindling. So they were brilliant. I was meant to go to Red Flag. Unfortunately, I broke my hand, which meant I was delayed in my tour, one of my tours to the Falklands. So somebody else had to go to the Falklands in my stead, and then they later took my Red Flag slot. So Red Flag is an exercise in Las Vegas, which a lot of people say is one of the best things they ever did. Unfortunately, because I broke my hand chasing a dog in the garden, I didn't get to do it. But Denmark and India, to answer your question, they were great places. James, hello, James Mintram. Lingy, if there's one jet that you haven't flown that you'd like to, what is it? That is a good question. I've been very impressed of late with the F-22 and the demo that does. Watching that at the Dubai Air Show in Riyadh last year was absolutely fantastic. How capable that aeroplane is and what it does is brilliant. But I do have to say, I think the Viper, the F-16, is such a good-looking aeroplane. It's always been good-looking. I love what the Thunderbirds do with it. So I do think that is definitely an aeroplane I'd love to have a go at. Likewise with the Super Hornet. The Blue Angels have just transferred from the Legacy Hornet into the Super Hornet. So if there's any Blue Angels listening, then please give me a call. I'd love to come over and have an experience of what the Super Hornet is like, especially with what you guys do with it, flying very, very close upside down and doing some crazy things. So, I think an F-16, a Super Hornet, any American F-jet, let's just say that. I think from a Phantom all the way up to the F-22, I think I'd love to have a go at any of those. I've got a question here from Dhruv Vital. Do you think a Typhoon is better than an F-35? I think the requirement is very different for what the airplanes are meant to do. Typhoon is very good at going in as this sort of multi-role, fight your way in, carry out the mission, fight your way out. The F-35 is designed to be something very different. So it is the next generation up in terms of the sensors and the capability. So if you put them up in a dogfight, I actually couldn't tell you which one's going to be better. The Typhoon is fantastic. I had a lot of fights in the Tornado against the Typhoon. And as I say, I actually got to experience it in the Typhoon itself. I never got to fly against an F-35. I've got a lot of friends who fly them, and they do say it is an absolutely incredible aeroplane. And they are blown away by what it can do. And So I do think it's very good, very capable, but I don't know the answer to do I think a Typhoon is better. And I think the answer to your question is do I think it's better is depends what you're trying to do with it. I think from a dogfighting perspective, Typhoon's going to be very good. From an overall mission perspective, then perhaps F-35 is going to be better. But I don't actually know the answer, I'm afraid. The Freckle Puny. What was the acceleration like in the Tornado F3? Tornado F3 was very, very fast at low level. These RB199 engines were tuned to be low level, fast accelerating engines. In fact, the way it worked is one of them was tuned for low level acceleration or operation, and one was tuned for medium, high level operation. But you could go from sort of 200 knots with the throttle back at throttles back at relatively idle, and then punch it into max reheat combat, and you get a huge amount of thrust. And it does. If you're in a clean aeroplane with light fuel load, you get pushed back in your seat. And what was more impressive is that the deceleration. So if you went from a supersonic speed at low level, so 250 feet, and you're doing over Mach 1, you then go to idle, and then you schedule the speed brakes, the air brakes, you would get flung forward in your straps. And it was really noticeable, that deceleration as you went sort of back through the sound barrier. But the acceleration, to answer your question, was phenomenal. It was really quite impressive, and you really did feel that punch as the reheat came in. You looked at your nozzle gauges to make sure you're getting the right amount of reheat from where your throttle position was, and when they lit up, you did definitely feel the kick in the back of that acceleration. It was fantastic. Kim says, "Hi, Lingy." Hello, Kim. I hope Devon is still good down there. I'm sure we'll be back next year. Paul Vernals. Hi, Mike. What's your favourite UK airfield to operate from when away from your home base with the Reds or the Blades? That is a good question. Of course, I've visited a lot of places with the Reds. Now, the Red Arrows Hawks need about a mile of runway, so about the minimum of 6,000 feet of runway, which limits you to really international airports and military air bases. Now, of course, a lot of display flying takes place at weekends, so a lot of Air Force bases don't operate at weekends, or support is limited. So we would tend to use places like Exeter, Bournemouth, Newquay, Biggin Hill, Newcastle, Teesside, Edinburgh. Those places that were international airports, in the Hawk, that is. Excuse me. So I liked all those places. It was always great to go back and see some familiar faces. Obviously, I loved going to Biggin Hill every time, because that was just so warming to go back to my old stomping ground and see some people on the ground there that I've stayed in touch with since I grew up there. But then Bournemouth was always good. You get looked after very well. Exeter, the team at Exeter would bend over backwards to make sure that the Red Arrows got everything they needed from an aircrew perspective, from a ground crew perspective, from a support perspective. So anyone from Exeter, I think it's XLR. I don't want to do the service, gents, but I think it was, and they were brilliant. So I do enjoy going there. But Newcastle was good. Same up there. They would look after us all the time. Everywhere we went, we got looked after very well. So I do kind of miss that sort of looking after the big team perspective. But now in the Blades, we just go away as 4 people, maybe with a commentator coming with us. So it might be 5 of us, and we do all of our own servicing. So it's now great to sort of rock up at a little airfield like the place near Cromer. I think it's called North Reps. I think that's what it's called. And we did the Cromer display, and we landed at this tiny little grass strip where they had a fuel bowser that we filled the aeroplanes up with. And you have a cup of tea and you chat to the people on the campsite there. And it's just such a different experience, because you're so well supported with this huge team, or at least the circus that do all the aeroplane servicing in the Reds. Go over the Blades and you are it. You are doing the servicing. You're going to meet people. But it's been great in seeing the difference and thoroughly enjoying it and embracing it. But I think I'd have to say Biggin Hill, from a going away from home base, operating with the Red Arrows, was Biggin Hill. Blades, I'm going to say Biggin Hill again. Yeah, Biggin Hill. Hello, is it Sand Martin or Sand Martin? Good afternoon. What gen fighters of Tornado is considered to be 3rd or 4th? And what's manoeuvrability compared to the same F-14 or F-5 type fighter? Oh, blimey. I did look this up a while ago as to what the generations actually meant. And from the top of my head, I don't want to try and give you any duff information. So the answer is I don't know what generation it would be. Certainly wouldn't be 4th. I think 4th is your Typhoon. So it might be 3rd, might be 2nd. I don't know. And there is certain factors that give you that, and I'm afraid I can't remember what they were, so I don't want to try and give you enough information. What's maneuverability compared to the same F-14? Yeah, probably similar to the F-14, and maybe to the F-5. The problem with the Tornado is that it was, of course, designed as the multi-role combat aircraft back in the day. So it's actually got quite narrow wings, which means that when the wings are forward and you're trying to, at slow speed, trying to get turning performance, it isn't that fantastic in terms of the angle of attack that wing will give you, and therefore how quickly you can turn in a fight or how tightly you can turn in a fight. So it wasn't brilliant from that regard. So probably, yes, I would say similar to an F-14 or an F-5 in that sense. Ellie Sanders, random, hi, I met you a few times, like 4 times in 3 months. Back in the days of Red 10. Just wanted to say you're one of the people who inspired me aviation. So that's very nice to hear, Ellie. Thank you. And I hope you are getting on with your career and enjoying aviation as I know a lot of people that I've met through the last sort of 15 years at air shows and other places. It is great when I hear stories about people I've met that, you know, when they were youngsters who have gone into aviation and are now doing very well. So well done, and I hope you're enjoying it. And I hope that I can continue to inspire with the next ventures. Gary and Craig, hello, how are you doing? Hi Lingy, how would you compare flying the extra 300 on the blades to the Hawk T1 with arrows? And which is your favourite? I think I've already answered that. As I said, you know, flying a loop in for a wingman, for me, as Blade 3 versus Red 3, my hands are pretty much doing exactly the same thing. The Hawk, without a propeller, you have to anticipate your throttle a bit more, because not only is there what we call spool up lag, and with a jet engine, you know, it might be if you went from a low power setting to a high power setting, you wouldn't get that power instantaneously. It would take a finite amount of time. Could be 7 to 12 seconds maybe from idle to full power. Whereas in a propeller-driven aeroplane, that is pretty much instantaneous. You go from idle to full power, you get that propeller biting, and it'll give you the thrust. And conversely, when you want to slow down in a Hawk, if you go to idle, and you don't use the air brake, it's a slippery aeroplane. There's not a huge amount of drag. Whereas with a propeller aeroplane, if you go to idle, those propeller blades just are almost like a barn door. So you get a lot of drag from the propeller, and you can use it to slow you down even quicker. So less anticipation with the throttle, I would say. But then you're not actually given a huge amount of thrust in the extra for what we're trying to do with it. So you do have to be quite careful with what you do with the extra throttle. But I would say, yeah, compared to flying wise, it's the other thing is range. You know, so if you were going in a Hawk, you could probably fly for around about 650, 700 miles, nautical miles, or maybe even 800 miles. Excuse me a sec, I'm just going to have a cough. Don't worry, it's not COVID. Yeah, so you could fly for about 700 miles. In the extra 300, we could probably only do a couple or a few hundred miles. But that said, we can go straight into the display after that. Then we did that exact thing for Guernsey display this year. So we launched from Northamptonshire. We flew, I think it was an hour and 40 minutes down to Guernsey. We held behind the crowd for 5 minutes, waiting for the previous display to finish, and then ran in, did a 15-minute display, landed. So I think it was a 2 hour 10-minute flight, I think, maybe a bit longer. But you know, you can do that. And you're only doing 150 knots, whereas in the Hawk, you're doing 360 knots. So well over twice the speed. So that's the biggest difference, is that you don't cover as much ground and you can't go as far. That's the major differences. Virtual BBMF, good evening. Elaine Wesley, hi Lingy. First of all, we were privileged to watch you and your display from Guernsey. It was fantastic. How did it feel to be asked to return back to the Reds in 2018? Thank you, Elaine. As I've just said, I really enjoyed Guernsey. It was really good to actually do a display this year because of the pandemic and the situation we're in. So it was great to come back to Guernsey. I'd been there as Red 10 a number of times, and always the warmest of welcomes. Never got to stay overnight as Red 10 because it was always the same day as the Jersey show. So I got flown in. It was actually in the Specsavers King Air. I'd do the pilot's brief at the Jersey show, jump on this King Air into Guernsey, straight to the castle, straight down to the seafront in Jersey to do the commentary there. So it was always a brilliant day for Red 10, and I enjoyed going there. But I never got to stay over. It was only early last year, after I'd left the Air Force, that I got asked to go back and present at the governor's house in Guernsey, and I stayed overnight for the first time, but had a great time. So a very warm welcome from everyone at Guernsey. So thank you for having us. The question you asked was, how did it feel to be asked to return back to the Reds in 2018? It's a tricky one to answer because the circumstances were of course dreadful. The accident that happened in March in 2018 was really, really terrible for the entire squadron. John Bayliss, who was the engineer, and got reconnecting here. Hopefully, we're all still going out. Are we good, Mike? Are we good, Mike? I'm not sure. Not sure. Alrighty, we'll keep going, and if it starts getting a bit bad, then perhaps we should draw stumps. But we'll see how we get on. How you happy with that, Mike? Sweet. We'll carry on. So how did it feel? It, as I said, the circumstances were horrendous. John's just started his tenure as Circus 3, and then there was a tragic accident. So it was a very important year, 2018, for the Royal Air Force. 100 years of the Royal Air Force, and it was very, very important that the Red Arrows had a 9 ship. Now, the fact that I was still flying the Hawk at Central Flying School as the air safety manager and as an instrument examiner, I was still current on the jet. I'd been Red 3 before, so from a training perspective, if you like, to actually, for the quickest person to get back in and do it, I was that person, and I was doing this desk job. I had unfortunately already started working with the Blades, and the idea in 2018 is that I was going to do every display in the summer as a guest pilot with the Blades before I joined full time in 2019. So I'd already started working out with them, but then when I got told, you came back to the Red Arrows to be Red 3 for your final tour in the Royal Air Force. So it's a privilege, it's an honour, but it was such a difficult time for the team. Just for, of course, the Blues, all of these ground support personnel are very close in the Red Arrows anyway. It's a small unit, and then when that happens to one of their guys, it was such a bitter blow. And obviously, it was a difficult time to rejoin the team, given the situation, given the circumstances. So while it was a privilege, it was a bitter privilege. But the team knuckled down. We got our display clearance on time, ready to put on the 2018 season. And because it was RF 100, it was a very important year to have the Red Arrows as a 9 ship at the Diamond 9. So I was honoured in that respect. Jude Mal asking for a friend. Have you ever met the Grand Old Duke of York? I have no idea. Don't shoot the messenger, but I'm intrigued. I'm not going to mention that on here, but watch this space. You may learn that story at some point in the future. Excuse me. The Freckle Puny. Given aerobatic teams adapt their displays to match the type flown, how do you think the Blue Angels, Thunderbirds and the Russian Swifts compare with their Red Arrows given the frontline types? That's a good question. Yeah, I've always enjoyed watching those frontline display teams. And so I mentioned already the Blue Angels and their Hornets, and now Super Hornets, the Thunderbirds and the F-16. The Swifts, they were incredible. I saw them in China in 2016. And what was most impressive, excuse me a second. What was most impressive was that they were mixing. So I think it was 5 Su-27s and 4 MiG-29s. So they had a Diamond 9, but with 2 different types. And they put on an incredible performance. They were so good to watch. I'd seen them before in Russia. We actually went with the Red Arrows back in 2012 to display in Russia, which was, again, a brilliant experience. And I saw these aeroplanes flying that I never thought I'd see for real, and saw these aeroplanes. So it was great. When you look at some of the teams, so certainly the European teams with the French, the Italian, the Spanish, the Canadians, with these sort of jet trainers and the Red Arrows, of course, it's a very different performance. The Saudi Hawks, another one. And in fact, Al Fassan in the UAE, it's a very different display because of the size of the aeroplanes, the fact they haven't got reheat. But I think generally the displays are relatively similar. Some of those extra manoeuvres you can do with the extra performance and extra size and grunt, if you like, that is where the differences lie. But I think the other thing about some of those, I'll use the American teams as an example, is that the display just seems to take a bit longer. The footprint of the display seems to be a bit bigger. The Red Arrows pride themselves on there's something happening in front of the crowd for 20 minutes, 18, 20 minutes, how long the display is. Whereas when I've watched some of the other teams, I just think sometimes there are gaps that necessarily don't really add to the display. I'll leave that there. Since you fought against Mirage 2000, can you describe its strengths and weaknesses? I think I've already answered that one. Did you ever go into combat in this Tornado 3? Not so much combat. As I say, I was in the sort of mid 2000 range, 2005, 2007 was I was flying the jet, which there was no real need for air defence in the campaigns that were going on at the time. But the key campaign for the Tornado 3 was quick reaction alert. So UK and Falkland Islands air defence. So that was the combat, if you like, that the Tornado 3 did. So I did an awful lot of that, but never actually went into combat overseas in a Tornado. I thought this question might come up. Richard Sheldrake, Hawk T1 is 40 years old. What next if money's unlimited? And you were at Brawley when the aircraft was new. Wow, fantastic. I've just said it already, I think. The aeroplane is still very capable for what the Red Arrows need it for. It's very reliable. It's very simple. The fleet is actually geared. It's been managed very well over the last 40 plus years to enable its longevity. And I think there's still a line in the sand of back end of this decade where it will stay in service with various units around the military. So I think there's a while to go yet, but it will eventually need replacing. Now, if you look actually at what the Canadians do with the Tutor, they don't use that aircraft in any other role apart from I did a bit of flight testing when they're their test pilot at school. But other than that, it is purely just used with the Canadian Snowbirds. And it might well be that is the case when it comes to it with the Hawk, is that the Hawk T1 will only be used by the display team. It is simple. It needs to be for that to be taken all around the world and keep it reliable, keep it easy. But if money was unlimited, what would the best aeroplane be to replace the Red Arrows jet? I get asked this a lot, and there are quite a few. A Saab Gripen would be an amazing aeroplane for a 9-ship jet display team, as would 9 Typhoons or 9 F-35s. But budget, unfortunately, saying money is unlimited is not the case. And a Typhoon is a very expensive aeroplane. It's also very expensive to operate, whereas a training aircraft is not so expensive. Hence why a lot of the European teams have training aircraft in their display team fleets. Jude has asked, have my girls shown interest in planes or flying? I've got 2 daughters, they're 2 and 5, and they love watching aeroplanes. Of course, I try not to ram down their throats the aeroplane thing, but they do love watching them. If aeroplanes fly over the house or helicopters, they're the first out to go and watch them. They came and watched the Blades display this summer, or one of our practices, and they enjoyed that. The older one had seen a bit of Red Arrows flying as well, but the younger one was born after I left the team. But they have shown an interest in it. I've taken the older one flying in a Cessna, and she thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to taking them both flying together and maybe get them introduced to aerobatic. So it's brilliant. And more interesting, actually, my 5-year-old has got at school at the moment. This term they're learning about space, and she's really got into space in the solar system. So she's perhaps going to be an astronaut, which makes me very happy. Can you describe any memorable DACT BFM photo? So DACT is dissimilar air combat training. BFM is basic fighting maneuvers, experiences flying the Tornado. I think I've already answered that when I talked about flying in India against the Mirage 2000, so I'll leave that one there. Ling, you're going back to last year's display season. What was your favourite formation fly past you did in your first year in the Blades? Worth question. There aren't that many fly past the Blades do. We do get asked to do a few every now and then, but of course the mixed formation at RIAT, we were very lucky to have been asked to fly on the wing of an A400. So lots of propellers going in formation. I know it was a bit of a Marmite fly past. Some people enjoyed it. Some stalwart hardcore RIAT goers weren't so keen, but you know what? It was something different, and I think it was actually quite popular among the people who weren't, they were there as a family day out to enjoy the show, and it gave them something different to see. So I think, flying on the wing of the A400 was definitely a highlight of last year. Craig, hello Craig. Hi Lingy. Would the Blades ever consider offering photographers the chance to fly alongside a Spitfire for a fee? Yes, there is a way of doing that. We actually do something with the Spitfire unit, the Ultimate Warbirds flights who are at Sywell, where if somebody buys a seat in the Spitfire, of course that is very expensive, I do understand that, but you can then tag on a wingman in the Blades aeroplane. So you can have a seat in the Spitfire and you can get 4 mates to come up in 4 different extras on the wing of the Spitfire and wave to you and watch you do aerobatics, and then do some individual aerobatics in the extra yourself. So that is something we do already offer, but of course that does mean you've actually got to pay for a seat in the Spitfire. I had looked at something specifically for photographers, so I don't want to spoil anything. Watch this space. The issue being is that we've got to pay for the operation costs of the Warbird, which, as you can probably imagine, are pretty eye-watering. So, while yes, we've got to operate and pay for the operation of our own extras, actually it's the operation of the Warbird that becomes your photography subject that becomes the cost limiting factor in most cases. So the answer, yes, Craig, is it might be something we do in the future. It is something you can do at the moment, provided you buy a seat in the Spitfire. That said, unfortunately, we do also have a no cameras policy. So I will have to get into the risk assessment side of it as to whether we let photographers take their own cameras. But never say never. It's not a definite no. Another tornado question. Oh, I have to rack my brains for this because it's been so long since I flew the Tornado. 13 years since I last flew a Tornado. Often use the thrust reversers on the Tornado F3. Well, they're pretty much redundant. No, you use them all the time. So what happened with the Tornado is that you had buckets that came out from around the engines. They sort of clamped around the engines, and then you use the throttle to bounce off the buckets to then give you reverse thrust. And the way you operated that was to rock outboard on the, get this right, I think it was the right-hand throttle. The left-hand throttle activated the spoilers on the wings, which dumped all the lift, so it broke the airflow up over the wing to sort of pin the aeroplane to the ground, if you like. That was called lift dump. And then the other throttle you rocked outboard, which activated these thrust reverse buckets. And then you could go up to max dry power, so not afterburner, of course, but dry power, so max power without afterburner to get max thrust reverse. So it was quite a useful thing. It actually had something called pre-arm thrust reverse as well. So you could actually select those outboard before you landed. You could actually put the throttles outboard, which meant that the spoilers and the thrust reversers would then automatically come out as soon as your wheels hit the ground. So if you were operating in very short strip, you could use the pre-arm thrust reverse to give you that maximum sort of lift dump, pinning on the ground, and deceleration. So it's quite a useful thing. But yes, so the answer is we use thrust reversers all the time with the Tornado, and they certainly were not redundant. How do you feel about the Hawk as an aerobatic platform in terms of thrust-to-weight ratio, roll rate, responsiveness, and controls, and both slow and fast flight? The answer to that is the Hawk is an incredible aerobatic aeroplane. It's got hydraulic control, so you can really get some incredible responsive control out of that aeroplane in both slow and fast flight. And yeah, it was a brilliant aerobatic aeroplane. Hey Mike, if you had the chance to display with the Blades, where and why? I'm assuming that question is, where would I most like to go to display with the Blades and why? I mentioned before about the Lake District. I think displaying in places where the topography is really quite a challenge, but also breathtakingly beautiful at the same time. They're displayed in the red areas in the Lake District, and it's so mesmerising seeing these mountains. They're also displayed in Switzerland in the Alps, and that was amazing. Where you've got these mountains climbing up either side of you. It's in a valley in the Alps, and it was just beautiful. So somewhere like that in the Blades would be brilliant because it's quite a tight display, so you can fit it into these. Into the valleys around the mountains. In fact, I went skiing a couple of years ago in St. Moritz, and there was a ski world championships going on, and we were at the top of a ski slope, and I heard a noise, a drone noise, and I looked over, and the Swiss turboprop team were arriving and did a display at this ski event. So it was fantastic to watch. So something like that, so a nice tight picturesque valley would be brilliant. So if there's anyone out there who wants a blades display near Windermere, then please give us a shout. Trench, what advice would you give someone wanting to go into the RAF as a fast jet pilot? That's a question I often get asked, and I think I would start at the beginning and say it depends at what stage of your life and career you are. Get as much help along the way as you can. So things like joining the Air Cadets if you're below 13 or under 13, join the Air Cadets. Concentrate on school. One slight regret I've got is I didn't do better academically than I could have done. In my teenage years, I was a bit of a tearaway, and I didn't work as hard as I should have done. I put a lot of effort into cadets, which in hindsight probably wasn't the best idea. You've got to focus on the academics, because if you don't get those academic credentials, you can't join anyway because you're not eligible. So, your A-levels are so important. Your GCSEs are so important. So I'd start there. And then just take each stage as it comes. Focus on the now. Put everything into the stage you're at. Yes, set your sights very high. So if you want to be a red house pilot, say to yourself, I want to get to that end goal. But focus on what's in front of you right now. So if you're going to fly the Texan, concentrate on the Texan course. Then you go and fly the Hawk, concentrate on the Hawk course. The Typhoon OCU, concentrate on that. And then think about the red arrows later on. So yes, set your goals high or your sights high, but focus on what's right in front of you and what you're doing at that present moment. What was your favourite manoeuvre on the Reds and in the Blades? I enjoyed, as Synchro 2 in the Reds, I enjoyed flying the mirror roll as a wingman, because you got to fly. It was very challenging. You had to sort of crank your neck all the way back. And you could only see about this much of Red 6's aeroplane. If you were in the right place, that's about as much as you could see, which was the pitot probe. If you think about the probe that sticks out the front of the jet, that's about all you could see. So that was a good one to fly. Blades-wise, I like flying in the Blades. I like them all, to be honest. They're all great manoeuvres. Crazy is good to get it right, because if you can get the right amount of rudder in and it's not too hot, you can actually get sort of proper knife edge flying in formation with an inverted blade one. So that's good fun.
I just see here, Mike, there's so many questions coming in, but I know you're going to be a busy man, so maybe do you want to pick
a couple of your questions already, Craig and Gary and Jude. So I'm just going to jump down to someone I haven't. Mike Child. Hi, Mike and Mike. It's a bit confusing. I enjoyed the Red Arrows documentary you featured in a couple of years ago. Does having a film crew around quite any added pressure with the team? That is a good question. No is the answer. It doesn't put any pressure on. You just try and ignore them. I think in my time, we had a film crew follow us in my first year in 2008. That was for a program called Danger Men. It's on Channel 5. It's still on YouTube, actually. It was quite interesting. They followed us out to the States for a tour. And then we did a couple with the BBC, one with ITV, and then that one in Channel 5 in 2018. So quite a lot of cameras around at the time. But you learn to just compartmentalize everything. You just focus on the job you're doing. If there happens to be a camera in the room, so be it. You just you don't have to worry about it. And you kind of get used to that after a fairly short period of time. So no, it doesn't really put any added pressure on the team. Lucas, my dream is to become a Typhoon pilot. I'm 14. When I'm able to join, will there still be much flying? How much do you use maths in the cockpit? When you're able to join, will there still be flying? Yes, there will. I mean, the Typhoon's due to be in service for decades to come, so there's definitely going to be people flying Typhoon when you're able to join. So yeah, don't be disheartened by that. And of course, the F-35 will go on even longer, so there will definitely still be flying to be had. How much do you use maths in the cockpit? I would say it depends on what you're doing. It depends on the systems in the aeroplane. But yes, there is an element of maths in just about everything. You're doing fuel calculations, you're doing distance time calculations. It might not necessarily be very accurate if you've got the systems to back it up and get you to the right place at the right time with the right weapon system, etc. But you have to have sort of this broad brush ability to work out how long it's going to take you to get somewhere and how much fuel you're going to use. So I would say you do use maths in the cockpit quite a bit. I'm actually finding more so now in the aeroplanes I'm flying at the moment, where you're doing the maths calculations a bit more. So yeah, I'd say there's a fair bit of maths that happens in the cockpit. What are your views on Tempest replacing the Typhoon? I don't really have a view. I think things have to evolve, and that is obviously the next step. Is the sixth generation of Tempest coming in to replace it down the line. Memorable memories from the F3. I think I've already talked about that. Favourite areas display I've done. Did I ever do a display in South Africa from Brett Reed? I didn't, and I wish I had done. And I don't think the Reds have been to South Africa since, I want to get this right, 1995, I think it was, when they did a tour of South Africa. And I don't think they've been back since. So unfortunately, I never got to go. In fact, I've never been to South Africa, so that is something I do definitely want to do. You all right, Mike?
Yep, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect, right. Okay, guys, I'm going to let Lingy pick 2 or 3 more questions to answer, and then we're going to wrap up this great Q&A. But yeah, so Lingy, pick a couple of more, and yeah, we'll wrap it up.
All right, then. Here we go. There's a question from an engineer here. I better answer that, so I'm not just talking about piloting and air shows. So Templar 7832, hi again. I'm joining the RAF next year as an engineer. Do you have any advice for getting into the Blues? The Blues selection, well, it's not really a selection. It's very different. So the pilots get selected through quite a formal process. With the Blues, it's more of a posting. So you get posted into the other branches of the Red Arrows, if you like. Whereas the pilots would get selected. So the only thing you could really do is just put it on your appraisal every year that it's somewhere where you want to go, something you want to do. So just let it be known that that's something you want to do, and then just keep knuckling down, keep working hard to get to that. So it's a difficult job to get, I think, because a lot of people want to do it. But a lot of the decision will be taken on merit and performance, I think. So definitely work hard to get your name known and be respected to get to those positions, I would suggest. Jez, do I miss the Air Force? Do you know what? It's being in the military it's a lifestyle. It's your life. It's not a job by any stretch. It does take everything to enjoy it, to be part of it. It is something I do miss. I made the conscious decision to leave on my 40th birthday. There are various stages during your commission where you can actually take the option to leave, and I made that conscious decision to do it because I just love flying, and the options for me in flying jobs were going to be relatively limited. In the rank I was, the jobs, my experiences, my qualifications. So I've been offered the job in the Blades, where I knew I was going to fly 3 times a day at least in a little aeroplane doing formation aerobatics, which is obviously something I absolutely love. So I made the conscious decision to leave, and I think it's quite a good stepping stone out of the military coming to 2XL. 2XL was founded by military pilots, and we have a lot of ex-military within the company, and it is really a sort of a home from home with people who speak the same language and operate very much in the same way. So yes, I do miss the Royal Air Force, but I also am enjoying the way I've joined or entered civilian life in 2XL, because it is kind of that little stepping stone out, rather than going from being in the Royal Air Force to being a trader in the city, where it's nothing like the military. So I'm quite lucky in that regard. So yes, I do miss the Royal Air Force. There are aspects of it I don't miss. I won't go into that, but I do miss the camaraderie and the being around people that are living that same lifestyle, living their boyhood dreams. Should we do one more, Mike?
Yep, one more, if you can hear me now. Yep.
I can. There's a couple of chap on here who's saying I shouldn't be speaking of national security, but I don't think I have done, so we'll ignore that one. Hello, I'm sporting a beard and a moustache. Yeah, I'm being a bit lazy this week because I'm not really working hard, so I haven't shaved, I'm afraid. Sorry. What's the fastest? There you go. I'll finish on that one. What's the fastest I ever went in a Tornado F3? Low and high level, please. That's from the Iceman 95. That's a good one to finish on, I think. I want to say I got to Mach 1.5 at low level, and I got to Mach 1.89, I think it was. It might have been a smidge higher at high level. So just under twice the speed of sound at high level, and about 1.5 times the speed of sound at low level. But as I've already mentioned, it was very much the deceleration from Mach 1.5 at low level that would catch you when you took the aircraft out of reheat and started scheduling the air brakes. Then that is when you would get flung forward in your strap. So I think that's all we've got time for, Mike. Check.
Absolutely, yeah. What a brilliant Q&A. Thanks a lot for coming on, Lingy. It's hopefully Lingy answered your questions there. I mean, they were coming flooding in, so yeah, maybe we can get you back on in the future, Lingy.
Yeah, I think I apologise to the people that I haven't answered your question, but yeah, a lot of them were probably repeats. But yeah, it was good to have a lot of familiar faces on and some great questions. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, like, thanks, guys, for coming on the show and getting your questions in, and I really appreciate you coming in. But yeah, Lingy, thank you very much. And if you just stay on the line for 1 minute, that'll be great. But thanks again for coming on.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.